Zach got there and I finally got a piece of plywood up. That was pretty scary.
And Zach had a headache for most of the night.
Yeah.
Did he have any nasal irritation or red eyes or anything?
He was just complaining of a headache, so they got out of their place and came up to mine.
Okay.
And hung out there for most of the night, and then we couldn't smell it, so then they went back down. They live about a quarter mile away, right at, not too much past the end of Hilo.
I'm going to interrupt just to say that Carrie's going to video this, and anybody that wants to get a video, a statement, you know, at the end.
Yeah, and also if you want to say something not on video, feel free, and Carrie will shut it off and we'll listen to you. It's just we're trying to be sure we don't miss the documentation of it.
Sorry, Jim.
It's okay.
Dave?
I didn't smell anything.
I got a call at 8:30. I got a call, no, at about 8:15 that the plant relief had lifted, that Daryl was having trouble getting a hold of PGV, and that he wondered if I could tell folks in the neighborhood. And I tried to call Bob, and Bob and I talked a couple of times. I left a message for Paul, but I made the estimate that driving from my house to PGV was too risky, and so I stayed put at home. And at some time, I got a call at 6:38 that they'd just secured the emergency steam relief lift.
6:38?
8:38, and shortly thereafter I lost phone, and so after that I don't know too much of what happened. And I live far enough from the plant that we didn't smell anything. However, today, driving by the plant, we smelled something, and Laura smelled it and got nauseous and threw up and got a bad headache. So I'm not sure, I tend to agree with Bob, I'm not sure that the plant is completely shut down and that there can't be a possibility of leaks. I think something's happening there.
So to add to the data, one of our teachers here, Terry Walker, this weekend drove by Yoga Oasis and smelled it and got an instant headache, and she asked me to relay this to the group, and I will ask her for a written document.
Or video.
Little more info. Zach got a hold of Civil Defense, and they told him to evacuate.
During the hurricane.
Yeah.
I spoke to them and I kept on trying to find out, should I evacuate? No one told me to evacuate.
They issued a public over the radio evacuation.
But
No,
I
no,
didn't
if
have
you're
power,
feeling ill.
so I didn't have.
If you're feeling ill.
What it said was, if you're feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's, if you're feeling
Drive out into
uncomfortable,
the
it's your
hurricane.
choice.
Drive into the hurricane and drive up to the Pahoja.
Yeah, well, plants are
And
here.
good
Watch out
luck.
for trees.
We have many things planned, or we have 3 or 4 things planned, but one of the things we're going to do, can I read the letter real quick,
sure.
Bob? One of the things we're going to do is we're going to have a open letter to Governor Abercrombie, both senators, both representatives, Mayor Kanoy, and all of the state legislators.
And it'll be CC'd to EPA because we're already.
And it'll be CC'd to EPA Region 9 because we're already in discussions with them. And I'll read the letter because it gets to some of the things that you're talking about, and it may be easier just to read it now so you know that where we're headed. The title of the letter is Incompetence or Indifference. An open letter from Puna Pono Alliance and, I don't have the words right, but the Hawaii Island Sierra Club, to the folks that we mentioned. Just before the landfall of Hurricane Iselle on August 7th, 2014, Puna Geothermal Venture went offline and began a release of geothermal fluids and noxious gas through the plant's emergency steam relief system. The release dumped the noxious gas into the community surrounding the geothermal power plant for some time. Residents, trapped in their homes by the hurricane reported smelling hydrogen sulfide at perceived levels higher than they had ever smelled before. We've talked to several that have said that. Several developed symptoms that could be associated with exposure to hydrogen sulfide, and one man passed out for an hour, possibly due to exposure. Many questions will need to be asked about the cause and consequences of this upset, but one question can be asked right now. Why was the plant operating when Hawaii Electric Light Company, PGV, and state and county regulators all should have known that operating the plant during a hurricane would possibly, in fact, probably lead to an upset? To understand why the decisions made or not made by HELCO, PGV, county and state regulators need to be called clearly into focus, we need only to review the last major upset at PGV on March 13th, 2013. On that date, PGV was operating near its maximum power and maintenance was being performed on one of the 2 transmission lines that take that power from the geothermal plant to the rest of the island. A malfunction on the 2nd transmission line caused a loss of load at PGV and a loss of electricity to some of the rest of the island, forcing the plant to instantly go from full load to no load. This caused a dangerous overpressure condition in the power plant, which required the emergency steam relief system to dump geothermal fluid with high concentrations of hydrogen sulfide into the air. Discussions between the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the State Department of Health, the County Civil Defense, and the community continue regarding corrective actions stemming from this incident. Now, 17 months later, we learned that PGV was operating at high power during the landfall of Hurricane Iselle. Anyone who understood the causes of the March 13th, 2013 upset cannot help but be perplexed by this fact. Were HELCO, PGV, and state and county regulators simply indifferent to the potential danger to the community, or were they incompetent? Any intelligent, informed person clearly understands that transmission lines will be lost and electric grid malfunctions are likely to occur during a hurricane. Any reasonable person with knowledge of Lower Puna knows that during even a local storm, access to PGV is difficult due to falling trees. Certainly anyone with knowledge of Lower Puna knows that evacuation of residents during high winds, if possible, is dangerous due to falling trees. And yet we now understand that PGV was operating probably during landfall of Hurricane Iselle. Although we do not know what caused the geothermal plant release of geothermal fluid and noxious gas to the air on the night of the hurricane, we do know that such an upset could have easily been predicted based on the March 13th, 2013 incident. We also know other things. We know that as hydrogen sulfide was pouring into the community, the hydrogen sulfide monitoring samplers provided by the State Department of Health went out of commission during the storm and apparently remained out of commission for several days.
You're going to need to fix that because 3 of them are operated by PGV.
Okay. We know the fire department's hazardous material team could not reach the area to monitor for hydrogen sulfide due to falling trees and hazardous conditions. We know that County Civil Defense ordered evacuation for residents feeling effects from exposure when such evacuation was either impossible or highly dangerous. The evacuation would have required exactly the same roads impassable to the hazardous material team.
Okay, Tom, I'm sorry, Wendy?
Uh-huh.
Wendy is disputing that they ordered an evacuation. Would you tell me?
No,
That
they
they
ordered,
suggested.
there's
You
an
need to
evacuation.
evacuate, someone had the language, if you're feeling
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, or, yeah.
But in the same moment, they weren't letting EMTs or the ambulance service operate because it was too
Yeah.
dangerous for them.
Yeah.
I just
So
wanted
it's a
to,
very
I
conflicted
I just wanted
message.
her to know that we understood.
Yeah. Of course, people are hurt and equipment is damaged in a hurricane. The community is grateful to the first responders and relief providers that have worked so hard and done so much in Lower Puna. But the problems noted with the order to evacuate have been identified and then ignored by political leadership for years. We know Hawaii County emergency procedures recommended by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency have not been fully implemented by the county. The EPA audit by the specifically recommended county procedures be developed with the community for accidents at PGV. We know that after Hawaii Island County Council passed an ordinance requiring creation of emergency procedures for PGV and practice of those procedures, the ordinance was vetoed by the mayor, who claimed additional procedures and practice were unnecessary. We know that the state monitoring system criticized in the Geothermal Public Health Assessment Report published almost a year ago have not been addressed by DOH. And we know that DOH has not visited or shown interest in health effects either caused by the current upset or the upset on March 13th, 2013, even though the department has been invited by the community several times. Now is the time for our political leaders to forcefully address these issues and, most importantly, follow through to be sure that they are corrected. And Bob's going to sign that as the president of PPA.
But I'm wondering if we shouldn't add another paragraph that would say PPA believes that the PGV power plant should be shut down until such time as a monitoring system that works is in place, and an emergency response plan is in place. I think we should put a paragraph in there asking that they should.
Concur, Bob. I'll do it.
All around storms.
Yeah,
Well,
well,
the safety, and then-
it's bigger than that, you'll see, but if we.
Now's a good
anyway.
time, no one's got power.
We got the power.
Well, you know, if Abercrombie would have gave that 4.9 million he spent to solar systems, we wouldn't even need it. Sorry.
Can I say something? One thing I'm concerned about, if, because of the order word, if they could, do one of their slimy, oh, there wasn't an order, and ignore everything else in the letter. So I am concerned about using that word unless we're absolutely sure there was an order given and not just a suggestion.
What order was that?
To evacuation.
Oh,
I-
no, we have the exact order. We have the record.
But before you sign it, it's
I will,
listed.
and we're actually working with Daryl from Civil Defense, I'll talk to him about it.
Thank you. And then I have another question was, somebody thought, speculation of course, that there weren't enough actual workers there at PGV at the time of the hurricane, and they couldn't get back there
They
to.
could not get there, that is true.
Okay.
Mike couldn't get there, and Ron, they had a difficult time getting there.
The
So it was a
masters.
skeleton
Okay.
staff?
Skeleton staff, that
Boy.
maybe should be put in there.
During a hurricane, well, we don't know for sure, but we should
Okay.
ask the
We
question.
could ask the question. And the other thing is, I would suggest CCing this to Ige, Iona.
Yes.
Joy.
We'll be done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
It'll be CC'd to everybody.
yeah.
And Chris Lee and all of them.
And in fact,
Everybody wanted-
in fact, as soon as the letter's finished and it's signed, it's going to be sent to the Honolulu Advertiser, the Tribune Herald, every newspaper we can find, including probably some off island.
Yeah, one comment.
We think it's a very serious
Corey's got
deficiency.
It wasn't even a hurricane, it was downgraded to a tropical storm.
Right.
So imagine if there's a real hurricane.
Can I talk to that just a second, because this
show
gets
the
into
video?
the setting, the second issue, which is the voting disenfranchisement that some people are putting. If we have a picture, and I can show it to anybody afterwards, but Nelson sent it to us, and it showed wind speed. And what happened is the hurricane's coming in and the eye's off the island. And the tremendously high winds in the northeast quadrant hit the tip, right where we are, hit the tip of the island. And then the hurricane, the front end of the hurricane after it hits the tip runs into the mountain. The eye's still out in the ocean.
Sure.
Okay.
But the front end of the tip is in the mountain, and it just knocked the hurricane immediately from something that was pretty big to something pretty small. And then some very low winds. When the eye hit, there were some very low winds south of here, 40 or 50 miles. And so the initial reports of all the hurricane, now a lot of this is my conjecture, you can't quote this, but I've just studied that print, I'm pretty sure I'm right. South of here, what happened was that when the eye hit, it was a very weak storm of 35, 45 miles an hour. And so it took, I don't think Civil Defense knew there was a big problem in Lower Puna in terms of trees and homes destroyed and stuff. I don't think they realized that until sometime late Friday. I think that until late Friday, they thought everything was okay. Because if you read all of the reports and stuff, none of them talk about Lower Puna, and yet Lower Puna suffered most of the damages. So I think that we need to be careful. Whether it was a hurricane or not, I don't know. But it depends on when you count it.
Yeah, you just want to be accurate, but,
Right.
but if you say, if you go with tropical storm, you can say, well, imagine what would happen if there was a hurricane. It's
Yeah.
not just a tropical storm.
Well, it was a hurricane as it approached, and I'll just be careful with the words.
Actually, it was not. It was downgraded well before it approached. Don't say hurricane.
What's well
She's right.
before?
Hours before.
How many hours?
The eye fell apart 100 miles off land.
Well, when it made landfall,
No.
was it still a hurricane or was it a tropical storm?
It was Hurricane Katrina, how big, what was the magnitude of
It was
Katrina?
5.
No, when it hit land, it was a week 3. And it happens all the time when hurricanes reach land, the maximum winds are achieved aboard the land long before the eye hits
Let me give
and
you
well before, so
But that's the landfall,
Well, let
that's
me
the
give you a
phrase.
little background
Not
on
the
Tom.
eye.
Tom here was a Navy commander, and he was in charge of the submarine that went to Kauai after Hurricane Iniki and powered up the island. And so he has some experience with hurricanes.
well, I did the federal government, I supervised a team that did the military's federal government report for Hurricane Katrina. So I've looked into this. It's conjecture on my part, but it's not
But he's
uninformed
educated.
conjecture.
He's educated.
conjecture.
Okay, but that's a good suggestion, is I'll scrub the words, because I don't want the words to get in the way of the message. And whether it's a tropical storm or hurricane
Well, if
doesn't
you had a
matter.
question about this.
Right.
Sustained.
We got a question over here.
This might be silly. I don't understand what exactly happened, because I was told, I'm on Wakamai, I'm on the bottom. I was told on Facebook that there was a gas leak. I contacted all the emergency places possible. We all know if you feel uncomfortable, you should leave. I was told by a friend the next day that what happened was a resident realized there was a gas leak, called a radio station. A radio station made an announcement, and then that's how Civil Defense found out. Is that
We
true?
don't know.
Yeah, so that's the thing, is I just would love to know the sequence of events.
We're gonna find out.
Yeah,
Because of the hurricane, it was really difficult.
Well, usually what happens is a lot of people talk to us after an incident and we can put it together. But in this particular one, Civil Defense has been so busy, I haven't wanted to bother Darryl and talk to him. And the second, he's got real issues right now he's got to solve. And the second problem is that PGV said they wouldn't give me any information until after they have finished their report to the Department of Health. So PGV is not giving information to the community.
And there was another
When
problem.
asked why they aren't giving information to the community now so that they can solve it, PGV told me that we need to concentrate on recovery from Hurricane Iselle, and we should not. So they told me I was out of line asking the question.
Yeah, how dare you,
Yeah.
wanting information?
You're gonna-
Meanwhile, is it shut
Well, there
down?
was one
We
other
don't know.
thing, and we didn't have phones or internet either, so we couldn't communicate with PGV, we couldn't communicate with anybody like from the area there, you know, and we couldn't get out of the area, so there was a complete breakdown of communication, and so and we haven't been able to put all the pieces together
Yeah,
quite
that's what it
yet,
seems like.
but we will.
Oh, yeah.
But the letter is hopefully written so that it discusses,
Every point, yeah.
well, most of what we've talked about may or may not have happened has nothing to do with the point of the letter, which is the plant shouldn't have been operating anyhow.
Right.
First place, yeah.
The plant should have been shut down before the hurricane ever
Got one
arrived.
behind you, and then we should probably get going back with the station.
So I'm Sabin, and Nikki Conti is my wife, and she, yesterday at the corners of Leilani and Pohoiki Road at 1 o'clock, driving into town to get some internet service and do some work, smelled very, very strong gas.
Experience
And
every day.
at that point in time, there was no internet, no phone to make a report And actually, we don't really even have civil
So
defenses
Siobhan,
now.
what we were doing is we're
Just gave-
gonna make video statements, or we wanna get all of this stuff documented and get us, please, a copy of that. And Carrie right here sitting next to me is shooting video testimonies right now,
I
so.
tried to get Nikki to come so she could do, but I am representing her, and that was her report.
Headache?
Just strong smell.
Did she get a headache?
She didn't tell me that she got a headache, but
Okay.
she had a very,
But you are gonna get us that information in writing or on video.
exactly.
Yeah, and if you want to just video yourself with a phone and send us a video.
Okay.
Do we have monitors?
No,
There are no monitors.
So
Not
right
yet.
now, we don't have any,
So there's no actual scientific documentation.
there's no monitors, all their monitors aren't working at this time,
I'm
there's
going
nothing.
to turn it over to you, Barb. What's your question?
Are there monitors?
There are, the official monitors used by the regulators to determine if PGV there are 4 of them. There's one that's the Department of Health monitor, which is up in Leilani Estates. There are 3 on the perimeter of PGV. Those monitors went out of commission when the power was lost, sometime around the time that the emergency releases. So there were no monitors. Hazmat, the hazardous material team, could not access the area. So they couldn't bring in the monitors that they tried to bring in. The community has no monitors yet. We're going to get some. Civil Defense is working with us to get some, but we don't have any yet. So the answer is that essentially there is no, and I'm not going to use the word scientific, I'm going to say instrument monitors that reveal hydrogen sulfide. One of the most sensitive ways of determining hydrogen sulfide in the world is smell. There's 2 problems with it. Each of us have a little different threshold. Bob's appears to be somewhere around 3 ppb. Mine's about 50 ppb. And so it depends on who it is.
But I wanna.
But it's still a very sensitive monitor.
No.
And there are people all over, people in this room and everywhere else that smell hydrogen
I want to
sulfide.
introduce Chris Bitkoff here in the back. He's a monitor, Biltkoff, I'm sorry. But there's no, he's a monitoring expert. He worked for the military at a hazardous weapons disposal site. And I believe if we can get the source data, we might be able to do some modeling. He's helping us design a monitoring system now that it's gonna take some time, but we're gonna ask to have the plant shut down until we get this done.
We need to understand, though, that relying on a handful of samplers, and they're not monitors, they're samplers, okay? It's a very important distinction. Because in any case, relying on a handful of point samplers is not a monitoring system, even if it's working, okay? There is no assurance that a handful of samplers is going to detect the cloud and provide a picture of what is coming out and going into the community. It just doesn't work that way. What we need is a dispersion model that runs continuously and gives us a picture supported by meteorology and the source terms. We know what's coming out of the pipe. Gives us a picture of what's happening, and that should be the basis for decision making about whether to evacuate and who is getting, the gas and that sort of stuff.
And Chris's statement is what we're currently in discussion with EPA, the Department of Health, and the County Civil Defense. And interestingly, for everybody's information, the County Civil Defense and